the channel. So today, obviously, as you know, we are going to be installing the ProPride 3P hitch on the Airstream, and super excited about this hitch. There's going to be a bunch of follow-ups as far as comparing it to the Hensley, so definitely stay tuned for that. But let's get into it. Alright, so I already put together my hitch bar. The key here is that you want to take a measurement from the top of your hitch and the top of what your hitch ball is, to kind of get some of your measurements as far as where the hitch box is going to be in reference to, you know, the hitch itself. So with my exact setup, obviously the Airstreams are just low trailers in comparison to most travel trailers. And then I do have a slight lift on my truck and 35-inch tires. So my truck's pretty tall. So I actually am going to have a 10-inch difference between the hitch and this. I wanted to point out one thing. This manual is so nice. I mean, you got great pictures. I mean, obviously they're using Airstream, which is awesome. It's standard, I swear. Anybody who owns an Airstream has a white Ford. I mean, not me, but I swear, white Fords they tow everything Airstream, I swear. They do give you some spots. I actually wrote in here what my hitch numbers were just so I wouldn't forget them. They have areas in here to do all of that. Again, where to put your numbers, what you have to subtract to get your numbers. So the manual is super well laid out, so it's not confusing at all to get your numbers right. All right. We need to measure from the center of the ball 26 inches back. So obviously this would be a little bit easy for you guys because, you know, you'll be doing it with two hands. But this is 26 inches there. Alright, so this front edge is where you want to mark. This mark isn't right. This is the one I marked while I had you guys on camera, and it ended up being about a ½ an inch off. So with this, I have my old battery tray, which we're not going to use for batteries, so that's not a big deal. So I'm actually still going to leave it in place. I'm just going to mark holes and drill through this one section to get the U-bolts through. But the other thing you're going to want to do is I'm also going to test fit the propane cover to make sure it works with these jacks, as if not I'm going to have to shift this plate around and whatnot to try to get that to work between this bike rack mount and then the jacks themselves. So I do have enough clearance. This is actually able to move forward just a little bit, and it will sit up a little bit once it's actually mounted to the screw hole up in here. And then I also still do have clearance. You want to check here that, you know, this jack's going to be able to rotate around. As you can see, I marked a hole here and here, so I'm going to drill these two holes. Alright, holes drilled. Let's get these brackets back on. Alright, when you put the U-bolts on, make sure you put these up and use flat washer and a lock washer. And then your nuts on top. These don't have to be super tight. The manual says no more than 50 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to throw, you know, I'll torque these down to 50 and move on to the next step. Alright, got the jacks mounted. I'm going to come back and finish torquing everything once everything's put on and done. Again, these jack bolts need to about 50 foot-pounds. So the next thing is we have to measure from here to here. We're going to be going 22 inches back, and that's going to be from the frame bracket. Now, as you can tell with here, my line is right in the propane. So with how this bracket's going to sit, I think I'll probably be all right with the one being on the outside of it. I will have to drill one hole here. So the next part of this install is to get the main unit mounted onto the hitch of the truck, and then you back the truck up to the hitch and get everything hooked up while the truck is supporting it, I'm going to do it completely wrong. What I'm going to do, because I have this camera on a cable that is tied to my truck doing a 360 time lapse, I'm going to attempt to pick this up by hand and get it mounted to the trailer. So bear with me. Don't do it this way, but enjoy the entertainment value of me trying to wrestle this extremely large hunk of metal onto the front of this trailer. And I hope it's just as entertaining as it is in my head. Try greasing a ball with one hand. Alright, so as you can tell, I greased the spring bar pretty well, and there's these little discs that have to go in. But we have to slide this over this first, because this whole assembly is going to go up into it. Just gotta tighten this up. It's 9/16. All right, now that we got the two spring bars off, we gotta get this cover plate off so we can access things to get the yoke installed. That comes off, and that gives us access to these holes for the big 3/4 inch bolts that come through here. All right, so the one thing that you do want to make mention of, obviously everything's loose right now as far as these bolts. You want this frame to pretty much be parallel with your frame. It's 1 to 2 inches, roughly about what you're looking for. And again, just make sure that this side and the other side measures the same, and get these bolts, everything tightened up. All right, everything's lined up. We got the yoke mounted. Everything is tight, but still needs to be torqued. So obviously at this point, you're just going to want to go over everything just one more quick time, just to make sure that your yoke is lined up, your frame brackets have equal distances on both sides, and obviously that center brace is in line with the hitch. The other big thing that you want to make sure that you do prior to torquing anything is make sure that your nylon nuts right here are facing out. And then we just kind of need to go over and torque everything. So these U-bolts are going to go to 55 foot-pounds. So we're going to start there. Make sure that they're all relatively equal length on both sides, and get those torqued to 55 foot-pounds. 55 foot-pounds. All right, we got these to 55 foot-pounds. The next ones they're going to move on to are these. These are going to go to 60 foot-pounds. And then the finals are going to be these big guys that they're going to go to 175 foot-pounds. All right, the next one, these big guys go to 175 foot-pounds. Snug both sides up first and then torque them. Alright guys, so that pretty much concludes the install of this. Everything's been tightened up, everything's adjusted. There probably will be a couple minor adjustments once I get the truck hooked back up. But one thing I want to do before putting this cover plate back on, and this is coming from me, I am originally from Northeast Ohio, so Rust Belt. So I hate rust. I've always treated everything with this fluid film. So prior to putting this cover back on, I'm just going to hit these bolts and kind of just around this area that's always going to be kind of covered that you're never really going to be able to clean. And again, that's just to prevent rust from happening. So just a fun little tech tip. So the install on the ProPride is complete. So to kind of touch up on the difference between installing this and the Hensley, there's parts that the Hensley are a little bit easier, and then there's parts about this that are a little bit easier. So to start with the ProPride, the thing I love about it is you don't have to drill in the frame. So like you'll see when I was mounting, the yoke bracket, I actually cut my propane tray too early and ended up actually moving the bracket, so I wouldn't have actually had to have done that. I mean, again, it's just a tray, so it's not a big deal, but that was a whoopsie on my behalf. Now, if I was drilling holes in the frame, I would have had to move that, and it would have been a whole nother hole in my frame, which, if it's unnecessary, I just don't want it there. So, huge advantage ProPride for the simple fact that it's a no drill type procedure. The other thing I like about it, which, I'll show you on the Hensley, is how the yoke works. It's just so much more low profile, out of the way, and with how far this propane kind of comes over on this one, I have a feeling that the strut bars that the Hensley use would have been a nightmare to adjust, because that bracket comes to about here, so I probably would have ended up having to take this off every time I needed to, adjust them or tighten them up a little bit. So again, another, this looks cleaner. And then honestly, the biggest thing that I like about this one better than the Hensley is just the sheer build quality. As you can tell, I mean, the welds are beautifully done. We have that forged, receiver end, which again, in my opinion, is a way better and more durable, system. And just overall aesthetics wise, it just looks cleaner, newer, more refined. Now, obviously it's going to be about a month and a half to 2 months before I actually tow it with this to really be able to tell, if there's any, real differences between the two systems. I mean, I'm sure they both perform great. Obviously, I know the Hensley does perform well. The other big thing I want to point out is these jacks. So the jack system is obviously, again, completely different than the Hensley. The thing I like the most is how these mount. Don't mind all of my random wires. Like I said, this thing is under construction, and that's all getting cut out. But I love these shackle mounts. And I'll show you again on the Hensley. It works. It's very rudimentary. This is just refined. It's clean. It looks like it will be just a longer lasting system. So let's go over to the Hensley, and I'll kind of show you some of the bigger differences with that. Last thing I want to point out, and it's not a huge thing, but it again, it goes back to that fit, form, function, and then just general caring about what your customer's getting. And below, these two tools are from Hensley. It's what you get with the Hitch. And then these top two are what you get from ProPride. As you can tell, if I can get it to focus, made in Taiwan. And then this is just a rudimentary bar. From ProPride, you get a Lang, which, if I can get it to focus, is made in the USA. And then a Performance Tool breaker bar, and then a Tektron socket, which are both also American made. I am a sucker for American made tools. As you can tell, I have, a lot of money in tools. I buy, this fancy brand that is way overpriced, but it's American made. My point is, again, it's all about the customer when it comes to ProPride and the experience. I've gone through 3 of these ratchets already in 6 months. I'm sure this will last me much, much longer. Okay, so as a Hensley, you can tell, looks a lot different than the ProPride. So again, with how we had to unhook this thing, I actually had to disconnect the weight bar so I could drop this thing completely down to the ground. I think regardless of the system, I would have had to do this. But these strut bars, which are the biggest difference, I would say, really honestly, between the two systems, the ProPride uses the Yoke, which mounts underneath, and then this utilizes these weight brackets in the back to keep the head secure. As you can tell, actually, we had an issue when we first put this on that the bracket shifted. Even with the the 2 bolts that, or the self-tapping screws that go in, it shifted and actually pulled these yokes out. And you can actually see on that backside, it pulled it right through that bracket. This is actually unnecessary. They don't have to be held this way because the strut bar gets pushed in. But when I called Hensley to discuss that, it was, yeah, sure, I could ship it back, and it was going to be 100% my responsibility to pay to have it, refurbished and everything else. And this was literally after 1 trip. We mounted this at the dealership's lot, towed it home, and it happened within that first 20 miles. The other thing I wanted to point out is these welds. And then also just the paint quality. This thing has been flaking paint since day 1. It pretty much came that way. I wax everything constantly, so I've been trying to keep it from, rusting. But you can kind of just see, just how honestly horrible these welds look in comparison. It's not super impressive, especially for, the price of these things. So I just kind of want you to make note. And then in comparison to that forged hitch, as you can tell, this is just pieces of plate, honestly horribly welded in there. And you can see like paint's flaking off everywhere. So in theory, this thing does tow great. It does exactly what it's supposed to, and it's been great other than that first issue. But again, it goes back to that build quality. This thing is just not even remotely close to the quality of craftsmanship as the ProPride. And then getting back to these weight bars, I haven't had an issue with them. They've worked as, described. But look at how they hook up. It's just a single pin that goes through. No bushings, nothing to hold things tight. And again, that's where I just got to give the ProPride. It's just cleaner and more refined, and it looks like the finished product versus this looks like a prototype. So with all of those things together, I'm happy I went with the ProPride. I will definitely obviously update this video once I get to towing with it more. The other big thing is the drop bar. Obviously Hensley sticks with the welded piece, and you can exchange these with them to get less or further drops if you need it. I haven't had an issue with it other than having to use the reducer, which I despise. I was happy I was able to order the 2.5 inch shank with the ProPride, so I don't have to deal with that. Because obviously with either of these systems, you don't leave this hitch in because it sticks so far out and you're just kind of asking for trouble. So dealing with the sleeve is obnoxious. As far as the quality, I haven't had any issues. Nothing's been bent, broken. Again, we'll go with the weld quality. They don't look good. And with being a welder myself, I hold welds to a higher standard, I think, than most. So I like to point that out, that it's just, I think they could use some help in that department. And as you can tell, it is so hot here. It's supposed to hit 100 today. So it is, it's warm. Oh wow, it's really, really bright. So that pretty much wraps up this video. If you guys have any, questions, concerns, comment down below. I would love to kind of get your feedback, regardless if you're a Hensley owner or a ProPride owner, or in the market for both. Feel free to, like I said, comment below. My email and everything else is available. So if you want more direct contact, reach out and I will help you as much as I can. But with on the Airstream, super excited. I went with the ProPride. I was kind of on the fence, obviously, when I ordered this one, and I wish I did it then. Again, it just kind of goes with that build quality aspect. One looks refined, one looks put together. So, till next time, guys, stay safe, safe travels, and see you out there.